All right. My name is Tim Dietrich. I'm the beef cattle marketing specialist with the Department of Ag. Darren had asked me to play a role in this, and I'm going to talk a little more on the marketing side about the smaller scale freezer beef, that type of stuff. Kenny did an excellent job talking about the commercial feeding industry, and we'll get a little more into options and such for someone who wants to go a little different route. This is the overview of the U.S. beef system, just the long and the short of it. Cow-calf operations, which we've got a lot of here in Kentucky. Typically going to sell our calves. Hopefully we background them a little bit, 45 days, maybe participate in a CPH 45 program, and then going to be selling in that 600 pound, give or take a little bit, weight range. Then we got backgrounders, stockers that are going to buy them at that weight, put them on grass or some commodity feeds, put some cheap gain on them, and take them up to the 800 to 850, maybe 900 pound weight range. They're going to sell them again. Generally speaking, going to have them in load lots, which is your 48 to 50,000 pounds of light cattle. Feedlot will buy them, finish them out, go to a packing plant, and then on to retail. Livestock system is complex and very segmented. Very segmented. Right now the cow-calf operator for the past couple of years, we're in pretty good shape. We may be crying the blues a little bit right now. Maybe 2 weeks ago, even worse than now. But if you compare it to 2 years ago, we're still really good. Your 550 pound steer bringing $2 a pound, it's $1,100. That's a whole lot more than we were seeing 2 years ago. It may not be that 1,300 we were seeing 8 months ago, but it's still really good. So the cow-calf guy's in pretty good shape. The stocker operator, they put in a bunch of those 5-weight steers in the spring at $250, maybe $275 a pound. Now he's taking them up to 800 pounds, and we've seen the price fluctuation. Those are margin operators. They've got fixed incoming costs, and then they've got to hope for a market at marketing time that will allow for a profit. Some of them aren't seeing that right now. Then it's the same with the feedlot. Anybody that's a margin operator, the cow-calf producer is the only one that's not a margin operator. With a purchase price, a set purchase price, sometime, whether it be the packer, not going to own the product near as long as a feedlot or a stocker operator, but you've got a cost coming in, and then you're going to sell that same product at a different point, and you hope the difference is profit. So there's expenses at each level, transportation costs, all that is involved. Is there a way to market directly to the end user? And that's kind of what we're talking about here in this session, pasture to plate. So we're talking about from the time that calf is born till it's on the consumer's plate. And yes, there are. Some are doing it. Initial thoughts. You don't eliminate the middle person, you become the middle person. And that's right. Because you got to imagine, if you're the cow-calf guy going to sell that 500, 550 pound calf, go to a stocker operator going to take it up to 850 pounds, sell to a feedlot, going to take it on to 1250, 1350, 1400 pounds. Everybody's planning to make a profit or they wouldn't buy initially. So every step along the way, and then of course there's truckers involved and everybody involved in the process is planning to make a profit. Logistics, you become that middle person if you're going to take them from pasture to plate. Sales, transportation, packaging, all that stuff has to be considered if you're going to be the one to take your calf all the way to the consumer. You got to be customer and market driven. Price takers beware. You've got to be a price maker. And one thing I've always said about the person doing some freezer beef, you've got to be a marketer. It really helps in your location. If you're in a setting with that's more urban rather than rural, you tend to have folks in those communities that are, maybe they've got a little more disposable income, or they're more willing to spend more of their income to get what we'll call the local food movement. I mean, you get up around Louisville now, local food, that's a big push. At the state fair, I remember the mayor came and spoke at the ham breakfast, and he was talking about the local food movement in Louisville. There's a big push for that. But one thing, if you're going to do freezer beef, don't ever try to convince or use in your sales pitch that it's less expensive. And, you know, better is subjective. What I like better may not be the same as you. The folks that are doing grass-fed beef, which obviously is not the focus of what this is, but some folks do that. If your customer doesn't know what to expect with grass-fed, they may be in for a rude awakening. A lot of them may like the sound of it. Oh, that's trendy. Let's go grass-fed. But better, you know, it's not more nutritious, and I do organic inspections, so I caution folks there too. The nutritious aspects of all beef, whether it's natural, grass-fed, grain-fed, which is what the majority in the U.S. is, nutritional aspects are all the same. So you've got to find your niche. And the big thing for freezer beef is people that want to know where their food comes from, and like the sense that they know how it has been raised. You know, we go to Walmart or Kroger, we don't know. We pick a piece of meat up out of the counter or out of the meat shelf. We don't know anything about the history of that product that's sitting there. So you've got to sell the story. It's not less expensive because the processing at the smaller plants, which we've got here in Kentucky, is going to be about twice as much as it is in the big processing plants where they'll do 6,000 head a day. So you're not going to sell them less expensive, but you've got to sell the story. Consumers' willingness to pay, and there you go. They've got to be willing to pay for the story. And you know, if we've already talked about implants, is your story going to be antibiotic and hormone-free or added hormone-free? Because if that's the case, and you've not implanted, and you've given up some performance, are you going to be paid for it? Because you're probably not going to have as many pounds to sell. So are you going to be paid for the difference by not implanting? Something to think about. Results suggest 15 to 20% of consumers will pay 10 to 20% premiums for local products. That's what we've been talking about. Local is not enough. Package of attributes. Consumers show little willingness to go out of their way. So there you go. You've got to have the system in place. You've got to have the networking ability to promote it. How is it going to work? Are you going to sell it live, a live animal, and you've got two different people going to take a half of it? And so you're going to either be paid by your live weight, you're going to be paid by carcass weight, and we talked, or Dare's touched on this morning. If they're paying on carcass weight, and let's say it's that 870 pound carcass, and they're getting a half, so a half of that would be what, 437 pounds, and they take home 250 pounds of meat. Well, are they going to be happy if they've never done this before? Do you think that's what they're expecting? So there's a lot of education goes along with this, and you want to make sure they're happy. Now, price-wise, I did speak with a gentleman up in central Kentucky that is doing freezer beef, and the way he does it is he sells it by the pounds of product they take home. So there's no big shock there. Because if you're selling it on the hanging weight, and we're saying one example was $2.17 a pound or $2.25 a pound, and I think, wow, you know, I go to the store and these steaks are $10 a pound. I'm getting this for, well, that's on the hanging weight. What he does is he pays all the processing and delivers to them their portion, whether they're buying a quarter or a half.
Is it USDA inspected?
It is USDA inspected, yeah.
That's
right, that's exactly right. And he touched on if you're using one of the smaller plants that's not USDA inspected, you cannot sell cuts of meat. So what you've got to do is you sell half of the animal to this person and half to this person. They do all the dealings with picking up the meat and so on and so forth. But yes, if it is USDA inspected, you can sell cuts of meat. And so that's the plant that he's using. The processing, one of the plants up there, it was $35 per head kill fee, and then 50 cents a pound on the hanging weight for processing. So he covers those costs, but then he's getting $5.50 a pound. Many different ways you can do it. If it's something you're interested in, look at all the different options and figure what's going to work best for you and your customers. The big thing about it, if you're going to do it, make sure you educate the customers on what to expect, because a lot of times there's a shock factor, as Dare mentioned, on how much actual meat they put in the freezer from a quarter or a half or something.
And how much of that is steak versus hamburger and roast?
Yep, that's right. I remember, and we've done this years ago, and one of my sister's co-workers got a half a beef from us, and I remember his comment on, never seen so many roasts in his life. You know, he just had a freezer full of roasts, and he doesn't run out of the good steaks, but he had a lot of roasts left.
Well, he didn't do it right. When he goes to get it processed, he just decided to eat all ribeyes.
Yeah.
If you're going to get it processed, make it high.
That's right. That's right. Typical challenges, processing costs, we've touched on that a little bit. Finding the market for the lower cuts. And so if you're not selling a quarter or a half, and you're going to piece it out, say you're going to do farmers markets or that sort of stuff, it's typically not too tough to sell the ribeyes and the strips and the T-bones and fillets, that sort of stuff. You got those ends, which is where the bulk of the meat is, and you got either a lot of roasts or a lot of ground meat. And so that's your challenge there. If you're going to do it by the cut rather than by the quarter or half, you know, make sure you got a place to go with all of it. Moving cuts proportional to the carcass yields. Again, some of the challenges if you're going to do it by the piece. Consistent quality and quality requirements. I think probably a lot of us, if we're feeding them at home, may not tend to get them as fat as if they're in a commercial feed yard. I know for myself, growing up on the farm, and you know, it was Grandpa had it and he did it, and I, as a youngster, see what Grandpa took to slaughter. Well, it wasn't until I went out west and saw the feed yard till I really truly saw what fat cattle looked like, and I'd never seen one of them on the farm that I grew up on. So, you know, it's that kind of knowing what you're going to feed them, know when that end point is there, when they're truly fat enough. I know KDA has got 2 guys in the state that are USDA graders, provide the service, will come grade your carcasses, and that's a great service, because if you were to get a USDA grader, they're going to charge you $70, $80 an hour from the time they leave wherever they're at to go to the plant and do the grading, and that gets kind of pricey, and KDA is covering that. So if you are in that business and you do want to have carcasses graded, we do have a couple guys, one in the east and one in the west, that covers that. But that's getting back to your quality. You know, I strongly would suggest if you're doing it, do like this gentleman. He knows which cows are going to have the higher quality, carcass quality animals each year. If you're in the business of maybe buying calves and feeding them out, and you don't get them from the same place, you go to stockyards or wherever, you're just not going to have a clue what to expect from calf crop to calf crop. And farmers typically aren't comfortable salespeople. I think we can say that because a lot of times, I mean, we're price takers. We're kind of in a commodity business. For grain farmers, what's the price of corn? Well, we got a bin full of corn we got to sell. Let's put it in the market. Feeder calves, let's go drop them off either at a CPH sale or at the stockyards for whatever, and we take the price that they bring that day. And to do this, you kind of got to be a salesman. You got to sell your story and make people believe that what you're doing is worth the extra money that's going to cost them. Because I can tell you, if they're looking for least cost, there's no way you can beat the average person just watching the ads, go buy what's on sale. I mean, in a year's time, you'll come out dollars ahead buying at Kroger or the grocery store versus doing this. So you got to sell your story. The processing ability in Kentucky. There's a lot of small processors all across the state. I've not had any animals processed at any of them. Some things I hear. Consistency in the cutting, consistency in doing it the same every time. I hear some issues there. I know KDA had a program a few years ago, and I personally stayed back from it because this is one of those that you kind of end up with egg on your face if you're not careful. With Rimke markets up around Cincinnati in northern Kentucky, and they wanted to do some freezer beef type stuff from folks that are producing in Kentucky. Well, it was all going to be processed at one of the processing plants. Of course, one of the biggest challenges, well, a lot of people don't have freezers. So they had a deal, I think Kentucky Proud Money actually bought freezers for everybody that wanted to buy is half a beef. And what ultimately killed it was the consistency of the cuts of the meat. Where they were getting them processed wasn't up to standard for the market that was selling it, and it ended right there. I don't remember what happened to all the freezers because we bought a bunch of freezers. I'm sure they went to good use. Advantages, process to individual request. Yep, I mean, if someone's getting them custom done, they can say, I want more roast or I want more ground beef. If it's a family with young kids, a lot of tacos and chili and a lot of ground beef use, maybe not so much for the roasts. Roasts are more for a lot of planning ahead. Cooking times takes a little longer and stuff. If it's the busy family today, they probably have more utilization of the ground beef product. Disadvantages, all processed a bit different. It's very expensive, smaller scale, no off-all market to offset some of the costs. Big processors, they sell everything there is from the processing of an animal. Direct marketers are typically working through these processors. Types of processors, USDA inspected, we touched on that. So if you are going to sell cuts, go to farmer's market, that sort of stuff, you got to make sure they're processed at a USDA inspected facility. Custom, that can be anybody. It's not USDA inspected, but you've got to sell the animal whole. Have two guys taking a half each or however it may be, because you don't sell cuts.
How many USDA places are still in Kentucky?
I honestly, I don't know.
I think it's 2025.
Probably, yeah, 20 to 25, I would say, across the state. In this part of the state, not as familiar. There is a place here in Princeton, right?
Is it still open? Is it?
Yeah.
And it's USDA, I believe. And then Hopkinsville,
Yeah. I think y'all got one out in Marshall County, right? A lot of times they'll schedule one day a week or something for certain days that the
for the
federal
inspector to be there, yeah.
Because they have to, and the kill charge is low. They have folks in here that do this, they know better than me, but in your charge for a federally inspected kill is a little higher than regular custom kill.
Yeah.
The other thing about the freezer beef you have to be a little cautious of is timing, because when deer season rolls around, a lot of these places shut down.
That's true. And I've heard
I'm picking that up this week.
some of the smaller plants up in the central part of the state, I mean, your timing, you got to plan a couple months in advance anyway to get a slot.
Yeah.
So, there's that challenge there of knowing when are my animals going to be ready, because you're going to have to schedule a couple months out to say this is the date for processing this spring. So you kind of got to be on top of knowing what your cattle will do and when they're going to reach that end point.
Tim, you may have covered this when I stepped out, but you talked on that. One advantage, I think, the freezer beef and buying local like that is on these kind of deals. Yeah, you can beat them with the sales and all, but the quality is the whole deal. And typically you can buy some aged beef more so in the freezer beef trade than you can, and aging is a great equalizer in terms of tenderness and all that. And I'm sure Renfro and them are going to get into all that, with
Right.
this group later. But
And the aging, and you do this, so how long do you typically age?
14 days.
14 days.
Right.
And in these commercial plants, the hanging time is a couple days, 2 to 3 days. Now they wet age, so they're put in vacuum sealed packages and just stuck in refrigeration, and that's what they're calling wet aging. But you do have that ability to dry age for 14 days, which
But a
is
small
not seen.
plant, a small house, a small plant at home, some of them you have to beg for that 14 days.
That's right.
in
Because
10
they're
days,
waiting for the next
Yeah.
person to come in.
10 days is the huge hurdle. If you can get past 10, you're in pretty good shape.
Yep.
But I mean, you get the most significant bang for your buck if you can get past 10,
And who in here, you're doing this, so let's not have you answer this. When you're aging the meat, what's actually happening? I mean, what do we age it for?
And do you age the whole carcass? I know we had one person, it was silly, got killed one place, got taken to a local butcher. The local butcher wanted to get all the hamburger and roast off and age just
the middle
steak.
meats?
Yeah, because he was very, very small.
I'm going to guess your whole carcass is hanging for the 14 days, yeah.
This was just a unique circumstance that we did with our last beef, but he wanted to, because he didn't have enough room for
Didn't have
storage.
If space is an issue,
Space
that's
is-
a smart way to do it,
Right.
because you're not getting the benefit on your hamburger, because it's a tenderness issue, so
Yeah.
if you're grinding it
It
anyway.
was mainly the hamburger.
But when you break that carcass, you're gonna lose a lot of shrinkage.
Shrinking, that's right too. So, Derek just stole my thunder here. What we were asking, why do we age for tenderness?
Has some flavor, a little.
And when it's becoming more tender, what's actually happening?
Enzymes are breaking.
What is it?
I think the enzymes in it are breaking.
That's
Down.
the proper way of saying the meat's starting to rot.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. The muscle
That's it.
fibers
You
are
got it
breaking
right.
down. Now, you know what, have you ever been to one of the high dollar steakhouses where it's dry aged for 30 days? You ever had a steak from there? I have. I don't like it. It's got a twang to it. It's turning. They gotta shave off the mold off the outside layer to get it. Now, I don't like it personally. It's pretty darn expensive. Of course, as he mentioned, it shrinks too. As that moisture comes out of it, you got less weight. It's going to be tender, but if you don't like the taste of it, I don't know what you gain. So, but aging is the process of the meat starting to break down the fibers, rotting. I mean, that's the simple terms of doing it, but the enzymes breaking down and becoming more tender. So aging is important. That is something that you can get much more on the local level than you can by going and getting cuts out of the grocery store. You got to ensure the food safety and sanitation, and of course that's, if you're not handling the cuts yourself, it's not an issue for you, but you just got to make sure the place that you're having it done is on top of that. Labeling, other services that come along labeling, I mean, a lot of times they're getting half a beef from the custom processor, they're getting it wrapped in freezer paper, and it may have roast written on it, or it may have GB for ground beef. Or if you go to some place that's a little more high tech and they do vacuum sealing, they may actually put a printed label on each package. Often a major contact point for customers, yes. You know, you've got to be there and available for your customers that way. And you've done this a while. Feedback, is it generally pretty good? Do you ever get any bad feedback? Do you have some customers that typically do buy and then they quit for some reason and you don't really know why?
Well, most of my customers have been repeat, so I must be doing a pretty good job.
That
I mean,
speaks volumes.
once in a while, you'll get somebody that says, oh, that steak was so tough, I couldn't eat it. Well, you're gonna have one of them once in a while. You can't help it.
Absolutely. Yep.
And you don't know what they did with it after they got it.
And that's right too.
They may have cooked it to the crisp.
Yep, that's right. Rules of thumb, all right, we've been over this dressing percentage and then the cut and yield. And that's how we get from that 1,200 pound steer down to 483 pounds of meat going home. And if you got somebody getting a half of it, well, they had the hanging weight there of 744 pounds, 370 or so pounds for their half, and they're taking home 240 pounds of meat. You know, if they've never done that before, they may be like, ooh, I don't know about this. So education is a big part of this process. And the direct to the consumer, review the size of the quarters for farmers markets, by the piece, on-farm retail. If you happen to have a store, CSAs. And this gentleman that I spoke with that does the freezer beef also has a meat CSA as of recently. And they have some poultry and some pork and beef. And the CSA is, if you're not familiar with them, and I'm known just enough to maybe talk about it, but not answer specifics, it's a, what is it, consumer?
Supported.
Yeah, there it is. Consumer support act. I just seen if you were on top of it. And it's essentially where the consumer is sharing in the risk of, they do it with vegetables a lot, I know, and you know, if it's a bad season, they pay you up front for it, and if it's a bad season, they don't end up with as much, but they've already paid for it. I would think in the meat side of things, there's not as much risk for them, because unless the animals die or something crazy like that. But they would, I don't know how they do it, if they do monthly, get a meat packet or what. But, you know, they're paying on the front end to get meat from this local producer throughout the year.
Internet sales.
Internet sales. So you don't do it all in quarters and halves then?
I don't do any quarters.
Don't do any. Yours is all by the piece.
Do you do like a family package? Somebody at home wants to do a family package where they put so much ground beef, so much roast, and so many steaks.
That just depends on what I've got on hand. I mean, if I need to, I'll put together a bulk order and put it up for sale. It's on much it is.
Curiosity, how many head do you do a year?
About 40.
40 head a year. That's a pretty big hill to climb right there. To move the meat from 40 animals a year, that's a challenge. Sides and quarters, customer buys, okay, we've been through all that. It's a large amount of meat. I mean, if you're just going to do sides and quarters, a lot of families, as I mentioned, don't have freezer space for it. So that can be a challenge. And two, the cost.
People don't understand how to buy it that way.
Right. Yep. And the cost. I mean, to say they're going to buy a half of a carcass at $5.50 a pound, and you got 250 pounds of meat, well, that's a pretty big check to write all at once. And if it's just a working family, they a lot of times can't do that. And the delivery and pickup, whether you're going to meet them somewhere, you know, because you do have to. You know, it typically is going to be frozen when you pick it up from the processor. So, you know, you got to have the arrangements made to get it picked up and delivered before it thaws out. Farmers markets, it's growing, no doubt about it. It can be a challenge though, because generally speaking, I mean, at the farmers markets, it's going to be a little pricier than at the grocery store, and so. Of course, I think folks coming there are more accustomed to that because it's the same with the produce. Probably going to pay a little more at a farmer's market, but you're going to get fresher, maybe right when it was harvested versus harvested early and shipped and bounced around. And tomatoes is the one thing I know, there's just no way to get a good tomato in the grocery store today. You want a good tomato, you better grow it yourself or find someone local that is growing it. Customers at farmers markets, as I said, they are not overly price sensitive. They know what to expect when they go there. And the product must be labeled for retail, resale, if you're going to sell in that venue. So if you're a processor, does your processor label each cut, weight, and so on? And then, of course, do you put a price on your label?
No.
No, you don't do a price. You just do what it is and the weight of it. And yeah, pricing must ensure proportional cut sales. On-farm retail, if you've got a reason, agritourism, folks that do this time of year, they'll do the corn mazes or things to draw big crowds to the farm. If maybe they've got an orchard and they're doing on-farm sales of apples, peaches, whatever it may be, a reason for them to be there already, and they can add this to it. That's good. If you're just trying to do it off the farm, of course, it sounds like that's probably your product that you sell, isn't it? Do you have most people come to you to get it, or do you end up delivering a lot of it, or how does that work?
I've got a little along with it.
A little, okay.
I mean, we even ship beef.
Oh, you ship it on dry ice? Okay. And that probably is internet sales, where that works from. From a local aspect, how big of an area folks come to you to get it?
I live just outside of Murray, and I have people drive from Metropolis. I've had people drive from Hopkinsville, and I've had people drive from Clarksville.
Okay, so pretty good area. And
Like, if I'm gonna be in Clarksville, like we haul back up to Clarksville, I send my customers to Clarksville message. I'm gonna be there, you need beef. I mean, I can throw a cooler of beef and
right.
take it with me.
So that's using your head a little bit. You know you're going to be somewhere. Reach out to those customers in that area and see what they may need and kind of service their needs then. That's good. And you must get the consumer to come to you. Of course, it sounds like you've worked it around to make it work the best for all the customers. CSAs, and we've been over this, telling you that I really didn't know what it was. Restaurants, do you do any restaurant sales?
No.
No. That's a little tougher deal. The restaurant sales, I mean, they're typically going to want a steady supply. If it's going to be an item they're going to have on the menu, unless they just do a feature or something like that. And that's the challenge on doing it locally here. Because if you think about trying to supply anything, and we've worked at trying to get school systems to get meat, but that constant supply of what they need all the time.
40 heads not enough.
Oh, 40 head, no, not a drop in the bucket for that. But then, when's your calving season?
I do spring and fall.
You do spring and fall. So you've got two different times to spread it out, but then if you think of trying to have an animal ready, let's say you're going to do one a month, and you need to have one a month all year long. That becomes a challenge when you got even two calving seasons. So that steady supply can be something tough. So if you're ever trying to do a restaurant, and you got great opportunities there for middle meats. That's what they sell the most of. They're high-end cuts. But then you got all your roasts and burgers to do something with. And you can take samples to them, follow up with them. I mean, there's a lot of avenues to try to get in that trade if that's something you want to try to get into. Restaurant survey, roughly 10 years ago, results from 106 restaurants. 40% had used Kentucky products in the past. 52% felt Kentucky products would help their business. Strong preference for fresh over frozen, yeah, and 63% were willing to work with individual producers. So there's something, I mean, if you see that's an opportunity, if there's a smaller restaurant around you that you think they would be interested, again, they're going to have to see the value in the story that you're selling, because they can go to a Cisco or somebody else and get it for less money than you can produce it for. Retailers, again, pretty tough on a small scale to get anything in a retail. Farmers market may be as close to retail as you can feasibly do if you're a smaller operator. Success for direct marketers. You gotta be a people person. You gotta be able to tell the story, make people like you, make people like what you're doing. Sales and service oriented, you know, you gotta be able to deal with the good and the bad. I mean, when they come to you with a complaint, you don't just slam the door in their face, you try to figure it out what it's gonna take to make that customer happy, because I said, people will talk a whole lot more for something they're dissatisfied about than something they're satisfied about. So you try to squelch that. And have a strong market for the lower value cuts, the roasts and the burger. It's pretty easy to sell the middles, it's the roasts and the burgers that are the challenge. Know the cost of production. So yeah, if you're selling it, you kind of got to know what your costs are to be able to know if you're going to make a profit or not. And plan for the marketing before you produce. That's right. Don't just sit there and say, well, I'm going to feed 40 of them out, and then once they're ready, say, well, I got to get rid of these. Because you become a price taker rather than a price maker at that point. And through the Department of Ag, we've got the Kentucky Proud Program. Are you a member? Okay. And you can attest to it. It's branded. The logo you see there over the past, golly, 12, 13, 14 years, that logo and brand has gotten lots and lots of publicity, so it's pretty recognizable. It's local products, it's a membership program. Doesn't cost anything to be a member, but it is a membership program. There is a searchable database that you would have a listing in. Potential for some cost share opportunities for printed materials and advertising, publicizing. And a very recognizable brand, as I mentioned. It's had lots and lots of publicity over the past dozen years or so. And there's the website for it, KentuckyProud.com. To find out more if you're interested, you can go there and check it out.